Hi, this is Anthony Gucciardi, and I'm here today with an exceptionally intelligent scientist and researcher. His name is Sayer G. And we're going to talk about, since we just launched this Monsanto video revolt, a grassroots movement against Monsanto, we're going to talk about Monsanto's number one creation, actually, in my opinion, and I think Sayer would agree, glyphosate slash Roundup. And in case you're not familiar, that's the number one best-selling herbicide of all time, Roundup. And people are going out and spraying this on their lawn, not eating GMOs, and having no idea what they're doing to their bodies. And we're going to talk about, you'll see it up on screen here in a second, this massive compilation of data on Monsanto's Roundup and what it's doing to your body, specifically with the key ingredient glyphosate. So, Sayer, thanks a lot for talking with me. Just break down exactly what people are about to look at on screen.
Okay, what we've done over the years is to basically index all this research from the National Library of Medicine from high-impact, peer-reviewed, published journals. And it's actually there for anyone to see, so I encourage people to follow the links and go to the resource to see the science themselves. But, the biggest indictment, of course, of the anti-GMO movement is, it's not scientific, when in fact this massive body of research has accumulated showing that the opposite is true, and that in exceedingly small amounts, glyphosate can cause great damage to the cells of the body. And so what we've done is, over the years, we've indexed over 40 different adverse health effects linked in the literature itself to this herbicide, as well as mapping out the 26 adverse health effects insofar as it affects enzyme pathways in the body, gene expression, endocrine disruption, things like this. And it's all in that document.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. I mean, just looking at it right now on my screen, we see that it's linked up to lymphoma and DNA damage. And can you explain what this number is? The number is the cumulative number. How does that work exactly?
Well, what happens is, if it's like a large epidemiological survey, so they're looking at a broad swath of the population and showing, okay, this area, there's a lot of pesticide use and exposure, and then you see an uptick in lymphoma. That's a higher quality study than, say, a cell study where they're administering an extremely small amount of glyphosate and showing that it's damaging the DNA. Now, for me, both types of studies are extremely valid. But in terms of the traditional valuation of evidence quality, that the medical establishment and the scientific elite use, the higher quality study would be considered sort of the human broad study. So what we do is we kind of nod to them and say, okay, this is the traditional valuation. So the higher cumulative knowledge score, the more sort of evidence quality it's assumed to have.
So what I think is really interesting is this isn't some conspiracy theory. This isn't some blog-based research. Because a lot of people go out and they think that, we're spewing all this information from blogs, and some people do that. But this is on PubMed. I mean, this is on the National Library of Medicine, and what you've done is index it to show people the massive amount of research. And what do you think? Do you think people just don't know this exists, or what?
Yeah, that's a great point. In fact, that was the inspiration behind the project. Greenman Info is really just an open access database. We have 20,000 abstracts indexed, and when it comes to things like glyphosate and Roundup, exactly, most people think, the research is clear, it's not harmful, our regulatory bodies say that it's safe to consume in large quantities. They just increase the acceptable upper limit to 100 parts per million in certain types of food. I think that was today. So we're seeing this great contradiction. The research shows clearly, a study just published a week ago shows in the parts per trillion range of concentration of glyphosate, that was able to stimulate the proliferation of breast cancer cells. And so, it's very disturbing to know this research exists. Let's use the precautionary principle. Let's limit exposure instead of saying, let's come up with an acceptable level of harm, as if that weren't the ultimate Orwellian phrase.
And what's really interesting is this is now polluting the groundwater. It's now tainting the food supply, as we know. They have Roundup-ready GMO crops for a reason. And what happens is, and I've covered this, is that they not only create resistant mutated bugs like roundworms that are completely resistant to Roundup and ultimately go and, quote-unquote evolve, more like they devolve to resist the Roundup. It is a defense mechanism, but at the same time it's mutating their bodies just like eating GMO may do to a human. But the fact of the matter is that Roundup has been shown time and time again to cause these negative effects, and the only answer that people are asking right now, and I get emails, is why haven't we banned it? And I think, obviously, with over 500 plus individuals inside the media and government working with Monsanto, literally employees or former employees, that it comes down to corruption. What do you think? I mean, is there not enough research? Do you think this is not enough, these, countless pieces of information?
Well, that's such a great point because you see the corruption in the government, but then you also see it in terms of the scientific literature itself because you have something called checkbook science. Monsanto literally hires private research agencies that then basically produce, quote, science that fits with their model, which is refute the GMO or Roundup cancer link or refute...
Corporate science.
Exactly. It's just an excreta. It's like a waste product produced through these corporations and their collusion with what were once really credible academic institutions. So what we do and what anyone can do is go on Medline, do searches, 22 million abstracts you can look through. This is paid for by the taxpayer dollar. And you'll find research clearly showing, okay, no, it is extremely toxic, or here's a link with a potential, cancer. And these are the studies that went through the filter because there's so much money trying to push this study down. There's no ethical obligation for anyone to publish a negative or null finding. So what we're seeing despite that is that, again, the studies that are in this PDF that are there to empower this great movement that you're hoping to facilitate, Anthony, and your colleagues, is that, yes, we need to stop the widespread destruction of the biosphere, and by implication, our own bodies are undergoing these direct effects of...
And it's literally destroying the biosphere. It's going in and killing the microorganisms that are responsible for the production of raw food with deep nutritional abilities to help, encourage your health and everything like that. So it's actually literally destroying the earth. I mean, that's not a sensational statement. It's literally taking out the biosphere through killing the microorganisms.
Absolutely true. Very few realize that, but they're finding that certain vital bacteria of great food importance that enable, for example, cows to produce milk in a certain way and for them to be cultured as a traditional cultured food are being decimated, and they're not even being found in certain regions of the world. And the direct correlation is with glyphosate usage. And then we're seeing the same dysbiosis or destruction of good bacteria in our guts, with 2 new studies indicating, at least in the animal model, that there are pathogenic bacteria that glyphosate induced the overgrowth of. Some of them include the botulin-secreting bacteria as well, which is probably the second most toxic substance on the planet.
Well, I'll tell you what, this PDF is a great way to send information to people who doubt the evidence and doubt the research. You don't get any more official than PubMed, and I understand a lot of those studies are bought and paid for that show the Roundup is safe. I mean, there's very few studies because you can't fudge the numbers that much. But this bounty of information, you can send this out, you can blast this out. You can get it at greenmedinfo.com, type in Roundup, or you can go right now to monsantovideorevolt.com and click research. Click research at the top right, the page, and it'll bring you to the research page where we have this PDF from Greenman Info, and you can share this out. Just blast it out. I mean, we're going to send out a newsletter and stuff like that, but please send this information to people. It's free. It doesn't hurt you, and they can understand now that, yeah, this Monsanto's creations are actually destroying not only our health, but the entire stability of nature. So Sarah, thanks for joining me. Thanks for talking with me. And I hope to see your Monsanto Video Revolt video